Hello and welcome to Miss Checkpoints, the Video Game Book Club podcast. Today we're starting our discussion on Killer 7. I'm your host Marcus, and joining me today is our homies. First off, we have...
Huh?
I see what you did there.
First off, we have Trevor.
It's good to be back.
And last but not least, we have the homie Greg.
Oh, what's up?
So Trevor, since this was your month of May, why don't you go ahead and talk to us about this game?
Okay, so you may have noticed, but we are not playing Killer 7. And in short, I'll kind of explain, or I'll just say that I was having some technical difficulties, and it actually extended beyond Killer 7, and I ran into some difficulties with Obra Dinn as well. But we're still going to talk about Obra Dinn since none of us started Killer 7. But first off, I just want to, take inventory. How's everybody else doing? It's been a while.
Man, I've been steadily just waiting to talk about this game, to be honest, and I've been playing a lot of Dead Cells.
I've been chilling, just playing a little bit of this, going back to the old grind of Street Fighter. That's about it. I've been playing other stuff too, but...
What about you, Trevor?
I wish I had my computer, but still got a PlayStation and an Xbox, so there's a bunch of games on there I've been not playing.
I've been playing more Celeste too. I almost 100% that game. Almost getting there. So yeah.
Anybody catch E3?
The press conferences, and then I kind of peeped a few things here and there, but mostly just press conferences.
The only thing that I never really keep track of E3 just because there's so much happening and like everybody's always just talking about whatever's the most exciting thing or whatever, but the only thing I caught was that they announced Banjo-Kazooie for Smash, which has me kind of hyped, even though I haven't played Smash in a couple of months, but he was way back when they were one of my most desired characters this is before Brawl came out. So it's been about 10 years that I've been wanting this character in this game, so I'm looking forward to being able to download them and get my hands on this character. Maybe re-pick up Smash just because of that character. You
really don't want to be part of the Smash community.
I mean, it's either Smash or Street Fighter, so I guess I'm not going to shower, you know what I'm saying?
All right, well, let's go on ahead and get into it, because I've been waiting to talk about this game too. So for this month, we played Return of the Obra Dinn. It's a puzzle video game that was developed and published by 3909 LLC, which is a Japan-based studio that was led by designer Lucas Pope. And this game was released just last year, 2018, and it was Lucas Pope's second game. His first game was 2013's Papers, Please, which I know Marcus has a lot of opinions about that game.
Yeah, they're good. They're good opinions.
Exactly.
Nothing bad.
Yeah. And Lucas Pope was actually a former developer at Naughty Dog, and he worked on the Uncharted series. And he's pretty much known mostly for his independent experimental games. And I believe it was after the... let me see, which Uncharted was it? Uncharted 2. He left Naughty Dog to move to Japan with his wife, who's also a game developer. And I guess that's where they started developing independent games with 3909. And I think Papers, Please kind of has a similar art style where it's kind of monochromatic.
Similar. It's more static.
Yeah.
There's no you're walking around in an environment or anything. It's you're looking at a interface. There's a lot of menus and systems going on that you're interacting with.
And part of just bringing up Papers, Please, I just want to put more emphasis on the fact of him making like experimental games, because it's by no means what you might consider a traditional video game. It involves what would you call it, Marcus?
With this game or Papers, Please?
Papers, Please.
I think Papers, Please involves like it's almost like a job. Like you are, you need to be very detail oriented. You need to pay attention to all the minute things, because essentially you're playing a security guard at a checkpoint between two countries, and there's some type of crisis, a la like a Cold War, or I think that's the time period. You're like a Russia adjacent type of country, and people are fleeing their country to come into yours, and so you're looking at their passport or their papers to see if they have the correct stamps. If they say they're from this region of this country, they have the correct insignia or seal. If their date of birth matches up to how they look, or their sex, or just all these different things. And like, it's a real, it seems pretty straightforward, but then there are elements where it's like, I mean, these people are leaving their country to find work or money or whatever. So sometimes they'll have a sob story about like, please, like my husband died to the Gestapo adjacent figures in their country, and they're escaping that, and they may not have the correct stuff, but if you don't let them get into that country, they could die. Or, like sometimes, because at the end of the day, you get paid based off of how many correct like people that you let in, versus you get minus money for letting in people that you shouldn't let in. So you're also trying to feed your family, and you have this like inner thing going on. So the game isn't very black and white at all. There's a lot of gray, and it's a game that there is a quote unquote true ending, but I've never been able to achieve that. And it's a game that I really wanted to play for this, but like I've probably played maybe about 6 or 7 hours of that game, and I've never like quote unquote beaten it, because I haven't gotten the good ending or whatever. But it is a really awesome game that I highly, highly, highly recommend. But it is also one of those games where it may not be everybody's cup of tea, because there isn't like a gameplay in the traditional sense. And this game is very much like that.
Yeah, and just kind of leading into Return of the Obra Dinn, like I said, it kind of uses that same monochromatic style, but Return of the Obra Dinn is a first-person 3D game that uses like kind of a graphical style similar to like the older Macintosh, or like you can actually change the color schemes. Like to the Commodore color scheme. It's still monochromatic, but it gives you that option. But basically it's set aboard a fictional East India Company ghost ship that's set in the early 1800s, that has a crew of passengers that all mysteriously died or disappeared. And your objective is to discover who they are based on the ship's manifest and how they died. And in order to do this, you use a combination of deductive reasoning as well as an item that you have. From what I'm reading, it's called a memento mortem, a stopwatch. And when using it, you can return to the moment of one of the crew members' deaths. And I believe you have 60 people that you have to determine from the ship. And like I said, the game is played from a first-person view. And I think that's pretty much it. You it's kind of a linear game, I would say.
What do you mean linear?
Well, I guess we'll talk about that once we get into it. But
okay.
just to finish out the intro, I pretty much wanted to play this game. One,
did you though?
after the technical issues with Killer 7, I had to pick another game, and we recently voted on which games we want to play for the next few months, and Return of the Obra Dinn was on my list, but it got outvoted by another game.
By you.
Like I said, it was on my list, so obviously I wanted to play it. But like I think it was Patrick Klepek who really talked up this game on Waypoint, which made me want to play it. But yeah, just because that game kind of got voted down or outvoted, this was kind of its second chance.
Swan song.
Yeah. So
I'm really happy that this game was chosen because this is a personal game. Once I found out that it was a Lucas Pope game, because I am such a fan of Papers, Please, that I was like, by some way, I'm either going to play this on the podcast or play it. I was even talking to Dante about potentially doing that as a bonus cast at one point. So I'm really excited that we got to play this. I guess we can get into it. It's really hard to really compare this game to a lot of things that I've played. I'm assuming you also have never played Papers, Please, Greg?
I played a little bit of it, maybe like an hour or something like that. I got it from GOG or something and just tried it out for a little bit.
Okay.
I played Papers, Please.
Okay. Do you see any parallels from what you guys played at Papers, Please to this?
No, not at all.
I think it takes on it utilizes a lot of cultural what's the word?
Like specific to the time period?
Yeah, that as well as the characters that it portrays. Like it tries to, I don't know, it doesn't specifically tell you, okay, this game is based in the 1800s. It kind of uses not necessarily stereotypes, but kind of choices like as far as accents, clothing.
I was gonna say it does tell you you're in 1800s because in the very beginning of the game you get the thing that says the ship's been gone for X amount of years and it just washed up and it's dated.
Yeah,
it doesn't say back in 1807, but it does have a date on some of the first slides you do, or I don't even want to say slides, screens you see of the game. But then other than that, you don't know.
Yeah, but just the use of different elements as far as cultural, accents and clothing. Like I said earlier, I think that's one through line that Papers, Please had as well.
Mm-hmm. I think the major one for me was the having to consistently go back into your, I don't want to say inventory, but your menus.
Yeah. Where
in Papers, Please, at least for me, you're going through the country stamps and you're seeing which are the capitals or the major cities of this country, because you need to check for that. You need to check for insomnias. You need to check for the rules in case because every day they introduce a new type of now we're not just this day we're only letting people from this country in, and then the next day they're saying, oh, now we're only letting people in from these countries, or we're only letting in people born before this day, or stuff like that. And so there's always some type of system that you're playing against, and I felt like in this game there's constantly going back into your is it your log, or I forgot what it's called in the game, but to
a journal.
Yeah, your journal to cross-reference characters across multiple scenes, or cross-reference okay, this is a woman, or versus this is a male, or this person sounds like they have a an accent. Let me go ahead and see, like, oh, this person is speaking a different language, or they say this specific word where it's like, I don't know what that word means, or it sounds like it's from a different language. Let me look it up to see, because, oh, there's only 2 people in this journal that are supposedly from Scotland, and that's a Scotland saying. So I know I've narrowed down, things like that. So there is that, but I don't know if that is necessarily. I mean, that is the through line for me between Papers, Please, but I don't play a ton of detective games, and from what I kind of looked up while you were talking games that are similar to, and there's not really anything that you can point to and say like, this is the one that inspired this or anything like that. But a lot of people were saying that the closest stuff would be the Sherlock Holmes games, as far as like the investigating and trying to figure things out.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say too. Once we did start talking about similar games, I don't know if y'all have played any, but I played I think it's the more recent one on Xbox.
Sure, no, I've never played. I've been interested in playing them, but I've never played any of them.
Yeah, I've never played them.
And then I know for me, since we played Phoenix Wright, I've been trying to get another handheld game on our list, and I've introduced or tried to bring out some detective games like Ghost Trick and this Ghost Trick Phantom Detective and what's the other one? But that is another one that's coming up as a game that is very similar, or like just detective work. Hotel Dusk. Hotel Dusk is the other one that I've been trying to get on. But you guys are just stonewalling me, gatekeeping me.
Hey man, y'all keep shooting down Oscar's wrath.
So yeah, kind of like what Trevor said. This game has an extremely unique art style. It's what I've read is a 1-bit dithered visuals of like old Macintosh adventure games, but then they have other color settings. So they have a Mac settings, the classic Mac, IBM. There's a Zenith, a Commodore. Did you guys play anything other than beyond the default, or?
I messed around with some of the other graphic options, but I just left it at default at the end.
I ended up changing it. I can't remember what I picked.
I ended up changing it a couple times. Maybe played like 3 or 4 hours in one, then switched to something else. But I really like the colored ones, the Commodore and the IBM. They added a little bit more. It wasn't like the game was hard to see, but there was some parts where it was like the color just kind of made it pop a little bit more for me. But I really, really dug the art style and just being able to walk around in this environment. I think let's look into this game. So, as Trevor said, this game takes place in 1807. The player assumes the role of an insurance adjuster for the London office of East India Company. This ship left from London to the Cape of Good Hope in South Africa in 1803, but it never reached its final destination, and it has since washed up to port with all 60 of its crew either dead or missing. And basically, you, as the role of the insurance adjuster, are tasked with determining the fate of the crew, including figure out how everybody died or how they met their fate, how they died, who killed them, or where they are if they are alive. And so you use the momentum mortem to basically, when you see a body, you pull out this compass and it buzzes, and then you can basically, you get almost like a snapshot of the scene of the crime / their final moments. So it's like you will hear it. The screen will go black, and then you'll hear a little bit of dialogue and some sound, or like if somebody falls overboard or whatever, you may hear somebody yelling, and then you just hear the splash, and then the game will go from black screen back to a still of the scene of the death. and you can kind of explore and take in everything that's happening, because there's usually, most deaths, there's at least one other person around, so you can kind of see people. And the cool thing is, while this is happening in your journal, every single scene that you see, it keeps a log of everybody that is in that scene. So like some scenes could just be two people, the victim and one other person, and then another scene could be like a victim and then like 25 to 45 other people. And so it kind of like casts a through line to help you determine who these people's identities are. Because the cool thing about this game is, beyond the graphics, like when you see a character in the game and you don't know their identity, when you see them in these stills, their face is almost like obscured in a way until you identify them, and then it makes their features a little bit more distinguishable, so then you can see them. And it
also,
go ahead.
When you do that, it also reveals other clues, like depending on where they are in that specific scene, that could hint towards what their occupation might be, who they work with, if they're around the same people in multiple scenes. So the way the game plays out, it's constantly throwing hints at you. It may not tell you, explicitly what or where the hint is, but any type of context is usable towards at least one character.
Yeah, like he said, like it. I mean, like usually it's pretty clear the person that died and how they died, because usually it's like somebody being shot or stabbed or whatever. But the real mystery is trying to figure out who the person is and who the person that delivered the fatal blow or shot or whatever is. You have to figure out their identities, and then, like you said, like there's a lot of context clues that you have to take in. So like you have to. It's not just important to see the person that got stabbed and the person that stabbed him. You need to see what the other people are doing in that scene, because that could be super valuable depending on who they're hanging out with, or where they are on the ship. Like they may be a top man versus a seaman versus a midshipman versus, all these different positions. And the cool thing is that this notebook or this journal that you have, not only do you use it to log and like determine how people died, and it has their information, but it also gives you a glossary of terms for like I guess popular or not popular, but like terms used in terms used in
nautical terms.
Yeah, nautical terms. So like, these could be potential clues to help you determine who a person is, like what a mate is, or a steward, or what a seaman's job is, what a top ship man's job is, what a midshipman's job is, and things like that. And then, like I said, also, like, not only do you see the list of all 60 people that were on the docket for the boat, but you see their country of origin. So some people, like there's 60 people in this game, and there's a good majority of them that are, like from England or from wherever. There's like maybe 5 Russians or 5 Indians, and there's people from Scotland and Ireland. But there's also like there's a Polish person. There are some people from the United States. There's some people from France, from Austria. So like some of that is important when you hear either an accent or, like I said, a very specific word that's being uttered in this person's last moments, which could give you a context clue to who is dying or who is in the scene. Where like if you can narrow it down to being like, oh, I heard somebody say like Mamma Mia or something like that, and it's like, okay, cool, there's only 2 Italians on this ship, so the person that's in this scene that is dying is one of those 2 people. And ultimately, like Trevor said, you have to solve all 60 reveal all 60 identities, but the way the game kind of progresses is every 3 you solve correctly, it locks in those characters, because the game never tells you when you're choosing names or whatever, like it never tells you oh yeah, this is fine, or don't change this or whatever. It's not until you see the progress and you hear that little ding, which is like low key. It's like one of the most satisfactory things about this game when you hear that little ding to let you know that you've gotten 3 new identities and deaths like correct. So then that way it can help you further. Like, not only is it crucial because like who these 3 people are, but that's 3 less people that you need to. That's 3 more people you have information for in case they're in other scenes or they killed somebody else. So it's this game is extremely rewarding in that regard.
And sometimes it's kind of daunting because you might find a scene where you're trying to figure out how one person died, and it leads you to, or you start following a trail to figure out, okay, who killed them, and then you're trying to figure out who that person's identity is, and you see them die in another scene, so you're trying to figure out who killed that person, and so it's kind of like this never-ending loop of one person killing another, and you have to find context clues in order to go all the way back to the beginning.
Yeah. Did you how did that go for you, Greg? We haven't really heard from you much.
So initially I think I was hitting like a rough part with the game where I was just having a hard time trying to like pick up on the clues. And it was like up and down for me. So I would eventually get to a part where I was stuck, and then I would kind of just keep looking at it over and over, trying to pick up on things, and I wouldn't find anything. So like the first day I played it definitely was kind of like a bad experience. But I came back the next day, and I was feeling a little bit better about it. And I think eventually I ended up hitting a wall towards the end of the game where I think at that point I was left with only trying to figure out. Well, actually, there was a few other people I hadn't figured, or a few other fates I hadn't figured out. But most of the ones were the ones where you're trying to figure out where they disappear in the middle at the end of the chapter, or somewhere in the chapter. Mm-hmm. I was having a hard time trying to figure out their fates, and eventually I just ended up just just being like, all right, F this. And just looking up because I really wanted to see how the game ended. To figure out, because there's a chapter that you don't, that doesn't fill out until you get the fates of everybody else. Mm-hmm. So I was interested to see how that turned out, and it was like, all right, well, I got to see how this goes. So I ended up just looking up the fates for the other, I want to say it was maybe 15 people I had left.
Okay.
And then just looking those up and just trying to see what happened in the last the chapter that was hidden until you figure out their fates.
Yeah, I didn't have that same experience at the end, but I did have that same experience in the beginning where I think I even tweeted out I played this game for 3 hours. I don't even know what I'm that very first day. It's I played this game for 3 hours and I have no idea what I'm doing or if I'm doing things correctly, because it was just you get a very, very, very brief tutorial where you see the first person die, and it's this mutiny happening, and you see basically 4 scenes, and then you're just left to the ship, and at that point I'm just uncovering more and more and more scenes, but I'm not making any progress as far as solving any puzzles, and that kind of it gave me a sense of dread, because I'm man, I have 30 plus scenes that I can solve for, and I think I've only solved 3 people. And that I just remember one night being especially frustrated because it just felt like I just watched an hour of deaths happening without making any progress, and I just in my mind I was there's going to be all this stuff that I have to solve, and I don't feel like I'm making more work for myself because I'm not solving anything.
It's one of those games that definitely made me feel like I was bad at video games. I was just kind of just looking at this clearly there's something I'm missing here, because I know the game isn't, it's giving you all the tools you need to figure these things out. It's just kind of like whether you can pick up on them or not.
Yeah, and I did have a couple of nights where I was messaging Dante because I know he had played this relatively recently, and I was like talking to him, and like I didn't know about the star thing. Like each character, there's a like a symbol above their portrait, and I think it was like 3 triangles or 3 stars. It's the least you have the least amount of clues to solve their deaths, and then the ones that had 1 were the easiest for you to solve. And so I didn't know about that in the game until maybe about 5 or 6 hours in, because Dante told me that, and that kind of helped me a little bit, because I was like, okay, if I make progress at least doing the 1 star or 1 symbol characters, that's at least good. I'm at least making progress. Like, I know who I should prioritize is these simpler ones. Did you guys know that, or did you guys?
Yeah, and I don't know if it's like if you just take too long to do something, it eventually tells you that, but like it tells you in the game eventually that.
Okay.
Because that's how I found out about it.
If you try to solve one of them, like that has 3 triangles on it, it'll tell you, like, hey, this one's probably more difficult. You should probably find some more clues.
Gotcha. Yeah, one of the things too I like is that because you have to, in order to progress, you have to know the name of the person, exactly how they died, and their killer. That kind of stops you from brute forcing your way through the game, where you can't, and because of the amount of crew members there are, you can't just randomly say, it's this person, he died this way, and I'll figure out the other thing. No, you have to get all 3 correct in order to progress. Though I will say that I had some moments where I had to stereotype some characters, and it made me feel kind of bad, because it was like, oh, there's only 4 Chinese characters, or there's only 4 characters from China or 4 characters from India. So if I know how all of them died. If I just rotate their names, I will eventually brute force this section and at least solve these 3 people. And so I ended up doing that for for 2 sections to brute force 3 characters.
And I think it's kind of intentional. It's kind of meant to be that way.
I like to feel like that is true, but I'm not sure.
I think it's done in a tasteful way, though. I don't think it's meant to be like, these characters are dressed like they're from
but
a Chinese.
In some cases, they are, because like the dude that is French, for the longest time I couldn't figure out who he is, but then I was like, oh, this dude is wearing stripes, and like. Maybe that's me, because he's not the only person. Well, I think he actually might be one of the only people that are wearing stripes. And then like there's a guy from Sierra Leone, and I'm like, must be the black guy. And and then the dude from what country was it? New Guinea, where he had a very distinct look, and there was a character in the portraits that was like, I was like, this guy might be that,
Yeah, but I think it was tasteful.
I do think it was tasteful, and I do think there was ways that you could properly find the. I think everything. Like, I don't think there was any intention by Lucas that you had to brute force your way. I bet, like, for the people that I potentially guessed on, there was probably somebody out there that was like, oh, well, if you follow this line of evidence or whatever, this clearly means that this is this person or this is this person. I just ended up brute forcing those 2 batches because I didn't want to continue to look. I wanted to progress. And I don't know. I did end up beating this game and solving all 60 cases or whatever. I did not, I'm proud to say that I did not look anything up. It stands for one thing. I couldn't figure out how this person died. I knew who the person was, but I could not for the life of me tell how the person, there was like a creature involved, and I couldn't tell like what the creature was. And once I figured out what the creature was, it was like they can do this thing as an attack. Like
from what I read, because there were a couple that I was unsure of, like their death was like clearly in my face, but I didn't know whether or not it was right. Yeah. And so there were some where I had to just go and check
to see how they died. But you knew, like, okay, I'm at this thing, and I could just like keep on switching it, but I have no idea if I have two others correct to even verify that this is correct.
And some of the deaths are actually a little ambiguous to where you can choose multiple answers, or not multiple answers, but there are multiple options to choose for their death. Like if somebody was, I think there was like strangled and something similar.
There was like crushed, strangled, different ways you could die by a creature being like slashed or decapitated or spiked or, you know, stabbed.
And so I think that kind of made a little bit of leeway. But still, like you said, if you didn't have two other options that you knew 100% were correct, you couldn't really test that.
Mm-hmm. And this has to be like one of the unluckiest ships of all time. Because, like, I mean, the things that happen in this game, it's like, let me pull up the chapter thing. But, like, I think the very first chapter or something is, like, some people get sick or something. So there's, like, actually, no, the very first chapter is they're loading up the ship. And then, like, some cargo crushes people.
Oh, yeah.
And then, like, the next chapter is, like, I think somebody gets a cold, and so, like, a lot of people are getting sick. And then there's another chapter where there's somebody that gets murdered in the night, and then the person that is the killer frames somebody else, so there's, like, an execution of the framed person. And then, this is a ship that this is the 1807s or 1800s, and I think that the cool thing about this game is he's willing to bring in some fantasy as well. So there are a lot of like really grody sea creatures. Like they confront a kraken-like creature. Mermaids, they encounter mermaids, and they encounter these like spider people, like with claws and that spike people that invade the ship, and people get crushed by cannons and get thrown overboard, or like there's just a ton of different ways that people go. There's some cursed treasure that they may or may not have found at some point. There's a mutiny on the ship. There's people that like escape the ship by the rowboats, and I don't know. Like, there's a lot going on in this game, and I think it's
like when I started getting into some of the, I guess what you would consider story beats of this game. Mm-hmm. I almost had to convince myself, like, is this the same ship? Am I looking at, stuff that happens on different ships? This can't be the same ship.
Yeah, dude, it's crazy. But it's so cool because I really like that it includes that fantasy element. Because I don't want to say like who knows if this is how people really died or whatever, because you just seeing snapshots and it could be whatever. But I do like the fact that it includes mermaids and a kraken or whatever, because it's like, for all we know, like, these people could have, like, in actuality, just been stabbed by somebody. But I think it's cool that he decided to include that. I don't really know how or what else we can say about this game, to be honest. Is there anything that we're missing?
I will say, I think I mentioned in the chat, I was trained to play this game when I was in elementary school, and I didn't even know it Because, like, I was in this, it was like a gifted learning program in elementary school.
Okay, flex on.
I mean, it's basically special ed is what I tell most people.
You mean special Trev.
But they had us do like a lot of different types of learning techniques and puzzles and things like that. And one of the ones that they used often was these logic puzzles. They were basically like these grids where you basically had to use deductive reasoning to find the solutions. Like, a simple one might be 4 or 5 guys went to the pet store, and you have to determine which guy bought which pet, like between a cat, dog, a rabbit, and a snake. And it might give you like 3 or 4 hints, like so-and-so doesn't like rabbits, or so-and-so's brother already has a pet dog, so he didn't get one. So you kind of have to use those clues to determine, who...
It's a lot of deductive reasoning.
Yeah, kind of process of elimination and deductive reasoning. And that's kind of like a simple example, but they get a lot more complex. Like, you might have to determine what age, each of the boys is, along with which pet that they bought at the pet store.
Sure.
And, they get a lot more complex than that.
So this is a question for both of you guys. How often, or did you guys, that should be the first question, did you guys take notes while playing this game?
I think that would have helped my experience somewhat, but I didn't. Most of it was me trying to go back into the book constantly and be like, okay, let me try and see, is there something I'm missing, or like going back to the picture, the photo, and trying to like maybe like pay attention to something from that to see if there's a clue I was missing.
Okay.
I was so close to taking notes.
Man, you guys suck.
Well, no, I had to figure out how to use the book to my advantage, because it was almost useless at first, because it's kind of finicky, because there's not really a tutorial to tell you, okay, if you want to do this, all you have to do is this. It's kind of trial and error at first, like, depending on if you're in a scene, and that's kind of one of the things that doesn't really distinguish, like, for you up front. But when you use your memento mortem and you go into a scene, there are certain points where you can't use a the memento mortem in order to quickly look in your journal and see, that person's entry in the journal, like, while you're trying to discover people. Like, you can only look around the scene and discover people at that point. And so you have to wait until either you finish that chain of scenes or you exit that scene. And so that was kind of the confusing part. And I think that was kind of along the same lines that you and Greg were talking about earlier, where, you were just waiting to try to figure out people's fates or their identities, and you were thrown into this series of scenes.
Yeah.
But once I figured out how to distinguish whether or not I was in a scene or, I was pretty much in free roam mode, where I can walk around the ship, I had a chance to play around with the journal and figure out some of its nuances. Like, okay, if I'm in front of a body and I hit tab, I can, view this person's entry in the journal. I can click on, let me see, I'm trying to remember exactly, like, if you're in a scene, in somebody's death scene, and you access the journal, rather than showing you their entry, it shows you their picture, like on the sketch.
On the portrait, yeah.
Mm-hmm. But you can still use that to add information to their bio. Like, you can change their name at that part. You can look at some of their their like which other scenes they've appeared in.
Yeah, you can bookmark them, so then that way it's easier to find.
So once I was able to kind of figure out how to navigate the journal, that helped me, quote unquote, take notes for the game.
Okay. I do agree the journal is extremely powerful. Like, obviously, that is like the main crux of this game as far as entering in data and seeing data. But I know for me, I don't take notes when I play games as far as like pertinent to the game. Whenever I take notes for us for the show, so it's like just cursory, like, oh, this is the name of this character and this is the name of this character and stuff like that. So while I was playing this game, this was the first game that I've ever played that I actually took notes that I had to consult or, back to. And it's always been something that I've wanted to do since I heard about Fez. Because I heard Fez was another one of those games that you had to just have notes, especially when the game first came out, when everybody was trying to figure out how to solve the game. So I really enjoyed taking notes in this game. I didn't take a ton, but it was like certain things where it was like, okay, this person is in the background of this scene. I don't necessarily know who they are, but I know that they are in this scene. So then I could kind of parse it down. Or if I looked at that portrait and this scene has 8 people in it, and the 8 people in that portrait are, how like when you could go to the portrait and see all the people in the scene, they're lit up and everybody else is faded out or blacked out.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, these people are speaking Russian, so these people that are at this table are Russian. So the people that are gambling, I'm going to assume are Russian. I don't know who is who, but I'm going to assume that those people are Russian. So when they pop up in other places or somebody makes a mention about a Russian, I can know I narrowed it down to it being one of those people. Or the same thing with, like, there was one guy that accused another guy of killing his brother. And I'm like, okay, cool. That must mean there are 2 people in this list that have the same last name. Sure enough, they were. So I was like, okay, cool. Now I need to find somebody. I need to find this character in a death scene with another character that I haven't quite yet identified, where I know it's one of these 2 people. I don't know which one, but supposedly this person got killed by this other person, so I need to go back to the previous scenes to see any scene that this person was in that he may or may not have killed somebody. And things like that, or, where it's like, who is, there was like an interpreter or like a translator for some characters when they were speaking a language. So I was like, okay, this person is a translator, or this person is always close to this other character who I've identified as either like the carpenter or the gunner or whatever. So this might be that person's helper or some stuff like that, So there was a lot of context clues that you get in the game, but it made more sense and it was easier for me to solve if I wrote that stuff out. Trying to think if there's anything else. I don't know if it's come across clear, but I freaking love this game. I'm not sure how you guys feel about it. I'm
super into this game. I really wish I wouldn't have had my computer died. For the 3rd time in the past 10 years since I built it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm actually building a new one, but I wish I would have been able to build it before we recorded.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, so that I could finish.
It's I wish I could like unlearn everything I have and replay this game. Like, I don't know if I'm ever going to have that same feeling of like the first time I played this, but also like I kind of like the stuff the answers aren't going to change,
Yeah.
So like I'm going to know some characters inherently. This is this person, this is this person, this is how they died or whatever. But I wish I could just like replay this game. Like, yeah.
I'm trying to think of some other games like that where it's like once you play it, it's like your experience, like you can't have that first experience anymore. Like,
yeah.
Yeah. I was like, so I was thinking Portal, but I don't really know if that still counts, right? Like,
I don't. To be honest, like I think part of the charm in Portal, because that, like I was gonna say with Phoenix Wright, I know for a fact that's a game that Dante goes back to, because I had talked to him about it, and then I know for me for Portal, I've gone back to that game, at least the first one. I've maybe played that game since it's come out. It would have come out in 2007, right? Something like that.
I think so. Yeah.
I think there was a point,
05, or not 05. It had to be like 06 or 07.
there was a point in time where I would play that game maybe once every 8 to 12 months. And it wasn't like it was like I forgot anything or anything like that, but it was just kind of just being in that world and playing that gameplay because it was so unique. And then especially with Portal 2, the dialogue, you know, like the character GLaDOS was so entertaining to hear talk and everything that it was kind of cool to be in that world where this game is cool to see, but there's not necessarily like anything to like draw me back in to see the same stuff unveiled in front of me again, I guess.
That makes sense.
I'm trying to think of any other game where like another puzzle game, because like even some like the puzzle games that I play, like I mean I play like the most not bare bones, but generic like Tetris and like Dr. Mario and Sudoku and like Picross and like all those games. Even if you've beaten this stage, I can maybe come back.
Well, I guess with that, you can kind of like in like a Picross, you can always improve time, right? Like
sure,
even if you
sure.
know
The final thing.
Yeah.
But this is one of those games where I won't be able to relive that first time I played it. And I probably will try to play this game again in a couple years when it's like no longer fresh on my mind. But I don't know if I'll be able to recapture it. But I love this game. And like the crazy thing is, I'm not even sure if this is my favorite game we've played this year. Because we've played some hits, you know? And I spent some time with some of these games that we've been playing, and this game is great, and it may not even be my number one at the end of this year. We'll see. How do you guys feel about this game? I mean, I guess you said you really, really dug it. Trevor, what about you, Greg? How are you feeling about this game?
So, I don't know if I'm crazy about it. Like, I liked it for the most part, but it's... I don't know, man. It's like I appreciate what this game is doing, but I don't necessarily know if it's for me. You know.
Yeah.
Like I don't really have anything negative to say about the game. It's mostly like any like deficiencies that are like on me, right? Like it's like I know I just sucked at it, right? So it's like I couldn't pick up on like little things or whatever. So it's like it's not the game's fault necessarily. It's just
do you think that part of the reason why you may not have liked it is there was like a quote on like I know we technically didn't have one, but there was like a deadline to have this game beaten by, so you were like trying to rush or you weren't playing at the pace that you would have liked to have played at?
No, I don't even think that was it. Like really, it was just like again like. It was like an up and down thing. Like the first day, like I said, I felt kind of bad. Like I can't figure this out. And then eventually, I got on a good pace. But then I hit a wall again. And then it was like the frustration of like I'm just not going to keep trying to like go to the scene and keep looking over and over and over and over and over. Like I would rather like I felt like I've gotten what I wanted out of the experience, and I'm like I'm just going to look this up because like I mean I don't think I mean, maybe I am cheating myself out of it at that point, but like I felt like I got what I wanted, or you know, the most of the experience out the game anyway. So it's like, all right, I don't feel too bad for like kind of cheating at this now.
Yeah, there was definitely. I think me and you, our experience kind of mimicked each other to a point. I think maybe you felt that way a lot longer than I did, because there was definitely a point where I was like, man, I'm like stuck after having solved 21 cases or people's identities. I really don't know how I'm going to. I think at that point I had seen almost all of the chapters, so I was like, I don't really know how I'm going to find these people's information. And then I stumbled upon something and I saw something and I was like, oh my gosh, this is like it was like a small. You know how like stuff like clothes where like sometimes like there's like a string that's missing or a string that's loose and you just tug at it and it unravels the whole thing. That was kind of my experience with this game, where once I saw this thing that like it wasn't pointed out at all, it was just me in this scene and looking at these things, and I saw this and I was like, hold up, wait, what? And then I looked at some other things that I was like, if this is true, then that means this is true. And those other things were true. And then I was like, oh, snap. So let me check this other side of this scene. And I went to the other side and I was like, yo, that is super sick, because they included this like super like context heavy thing that you see. And if you see it, then it helps you solve these other things. And once I saw that, it made me go into other scenes in the future and like really study everything that's happening, because there is so much that you like. There are sometimes it's like you'll see a chapter and the chapter may have like 5 segments and it's like, oh, this chapter has these same 8 characters and every single up until their deaths. And then sometimes you'll see like this character pops up in this scene, but they don't pop up in the other ones, but they're not at the scene of the crime. What are they doing? And then like, or like there are certain times where it's like, oh, like this scene takes place in the middle, you know, the middle of the ship, and then you can't get up to the top deck for like the first 2 sections of that chapter, and then you go to the 3rd section. It's like, oh, you can see everything on the middle and you can see everything on the top, and there's something completely different happening up top, and it's like, oh my god, like. This game gives you exactly like, which is kind of why I kind of felt bad a little bit brute forcing, because it gives you everything you could possibly need in order to solve this. It's just a matter of finding those either minute details or those like super hidden hints and being able to like piece everything together. I think this game it's. I mean, I don't play many detective games, so it's not a stretch saying it's the best detective game I've ever played. But I think this is like one of the best puzzle games I've ever played, where it's just he did everything right. I mean, even the voice acting, the sounds, the music, like just everything in it was great, and it like was. When they needed the accents, they had that. When you hear those little context clues of like some type of blade being sheathed or somebody being thrown overboard or the crunching of somebody's bones or the crunching of some part of the ship, just like all of that was like amazing. Like I don't know, man. It's super impressive that this guy went from Papers, Please, which is a game that I really liked, and to this game. Like Solo. It's insane.
Yeah, to go back to what you were talking about when you got to a point where you were just, you know, it seemed like everything just started to click.
Mm-hmm.
I think I was having that same epiphany around I can't remember the name of the chapter, where it's basically where you're kind of out at sea on 2 boats.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's the same scene you're referring to.
No.
That's kind of where I started to have that same epiphany where, oh man, everything is just kind of coming together. Solving, you know, fate after fate, you know, discovering identity. And so, you know, that's kind of what that, along with some of the fantasy elements that were added at that point, that's what really, you know, captivated me about this game.
Mm-hmm. And then I will say too, Greg, because I know you were talking about the disappearances and everything. That was very. I was pretty like scared, or like I was like, man, I don't know how I'm going to do this. But it actually isn't as difficult as it seems. Like a lot of it is just context clues where you're like, okay, where are we at in this chapter? When's the last, like, let me follow along and like, okay, this person disappeared. Let's follow their arc along and see where they are throughout these scenes. And like, once I figured that out and like kind of went in with that mindset, it was a lot easier for me to determine what happened or where that person ended up or anything like that. Like you have to take into consideration where the ship was at that chapter, you know, in conjunction with its route, like, and things like that.
I think the only other issue that I was having personally was it's just it's like that fear of like, and it's kind of stupid to have, but it's like that fear of like I'm playing the game wrong because I'm like, well, I don't want to get this wrong, even though there's literally no, you know, punishment or like anything for like guessing wrong, but you feel like you're doing it wrong, so it's like, well, I don't want to guess, I don't want to just do this. So
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
You know,
it took me a little bit to fight that feeling because, like I said, I brute force like 6 characters in the game, and like it feels. In hindsight, it was like I probably could have figured that out, but at the time when I was in the game, I was like, this is the only way I can figure out how to do this, and I want to progress through the story because once I solve these people, it'll be easier to, you know, progress. So I kind of saw it as an ends justify the means type of situation, and so I did it that way. But I definitely understand what you mean, where you're like, I don't want to play the game wrong. I'm not going to get the enjoyment of the game, you know, type of feeling. But yeah, and the only thing I will say, so did you solved everything, Greg, before you? Because you have the option, I think, once you solve, like, I think it's like either half or just that half of the cast, you're able to go back to London, which would cut the game short. And then you would get a different, like, you wouldn't get the quote unquote good ending because you wouldn't have solved everything, but you could still see the ending. Did you solve everything before you left, or did you?
No, yeah. So that's part of the reason why I ended up like just looking up, because I got to that point where it's raining, and then they tell you, hey, it's we gotta leave or whatever, and it's like, and I was like, well, I don't think this is the end of the game, but I'm just gonna try this just to see. And then like you do it, and then basically it lets you, after you go through that whole sequence, it you basically get your ending, and then it's like, hey, you can go back. Do you want us to like let you basically go back to that point right
before you made the decision?
Yeah. And then you can go back and try and figure out more if you want.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I was thinking like, oh, can I go back and do this and then come back? But I was like, you know what? Let me just try to see what I can and can't solve. So I ended up just staying on the ship and solving everything. And then at the end, once you do that, you get into town. I'm not sure if this happens for you, but you unlock that last chapter.
Yeah, once you solve everything.
Okay. I didn't realize it. I thought it happened if you just left, even if you didn't solve everything. I didn't realize you had to solve everything. Yeah. But yeah, then you see that, and my only complaint about this game is I felt like that last chapter was kind of pointless. It didn't, a
little bit.
It didn't really, like, it wasn't difficult. One, there was no like challenge to it. And then at that point, too, it was just kind of... Because, like, at that point, it's like there's only a handful of characters that you haven't solved who they are or what happened to them. And they were pretty much delivering, like, oh, this person died this way, like that. And it just didn't really add anything for me personally, other than closing the chapter on, like, now I know what happened to everybody. But that wasn't, like...
It wasn't you for it to be hidden like that. You were expected like some type of revelation,
exactly,
or whatever.
Exactly.
And it's not really much of it.
Yeah, it's almost like when there's a game that comes out. It made me think of Assassin's Creed 2, where like
with the
DLC
or whatever.
The DLC where it was like 13 chapters, but then chapter 7 and 8 were DLC, so you had to pay money to find out these 2 chapters of this game, because that's exactly how this was set up too, where I think there was 10 chapters in this game, and chapter 8 was the one that was hidden, and after you solve all the chapters, you could find out what happened in chapter 8, and it was just kind of like this one-off thing, and it was like, this isn't really satisfactory at all. And from my understanding, which I beat Assassin's Creed 2, but I did not do the DLC chapters, it's kind of the same thing, where it's like they just plucked 2 chapters out of this middle of this game that you don't really have any context for what happens or not, but you can pay the money and then play these 2 standalone chapters that are somehow in the middle of this game. And it just made me think of that, even though I haven't played it. But yeah, I was just like, why do they do this? But other than that, that was my only complaint about the game. Other than that, I think this game is brilliant. And I can't say, I will say the same thing I told my friends. I can't say that I would recommend this game to everybody. I will sing its praises to the high heavens, as people would say, but I don't think this game is for everybody.
It's a hard sell.
Yeah, I highly recommend anybody that is looking at this game or interested to watch the trailer of the game just to kind of get a feel for how the game looks, because I know that was a thing for some people. Where it's like, there's not enough contrast, or it hurts to look at this over a long period of time. But then beyond that too, just to kind of see some gameplay to see if that is something that you will find enjoyment out of, because it is a lot of going through menus and trying to match stuff, and it's not necessarily action packed in the traditional sense. What about you, Trevor? Anything you need to add, or closing comments?
I think we pretty much hit all of them, or at least I have.
Okay. Anything from you, Greg?
No, I think that's it.
It's just all right, Greg. You don't have to have your list or anything, but is this like near the bottom of things we played this year so far? Like right above Psychonauts?
Dang.
I'm trying to. I mean, Psychonauts is definitely pretty good, but
oh wait, you like Psychonauts?
Yeah, I like.
Oh, okay. Maybe I had it confused with. Maybe I knew Dante did, but maybe it was Trevor then.
I didn't have a problem with it.
Yeah, it's the middle of the pack. Every game that Trevor doesn't like is middle of the pack, and then when the list comes, it's like, oh, how'd that game end up at the bottom?
Yeah, I mean, I can't. I'm trying to think of everything we played, and I'm like, I can't think of. I mean, it's probably on the lower side, but it's not bad, I guess.
Okay. I can name all the games, but I like, if it's not this one game, it's one of my games I feel like is at the bottom for you. And if it wasn't Psychonauts, it was probably Grim Fandango.
Oh, yeah, no, that's at the bottom. Yeah. Yeah. This is better than Grim Fandango.
Okay, that's good.
Put that on the box.
All right. Do you guys got anything else to say about Return of the Obra Dinn? All right. It was nice hearing you guys. It's been a minute. It's been a minute. So this should conclude our this batch. This should have been a May game, but we're recording this middle of June. But this is still our May game. Damn it. We'll try to hopefully try to get our June game at least recorded in June as well. I guess we haven't even had the opportunity to reveal our next batch of games either. So for June, we have Greg's game, which some of us already have started. It's Brutal Legend. For July, it's Trevor's game, Forgotten Anne. And then for August, it is my game, Oddworld Stranger's Wrath. And then we are going to do something slightly different. We're going to have a guest choice game in September. So I think what we're going to do is I have 2 people in mind. I've already reached out to one and he said he'd do it. So I'm going to reach out to one of my friends to be on the show as our 4th member for that month, and they're going to choose the game, and we will talk about that game, and we'll play that game and talk about it, kind of like what we did with Celeste, where we had Tim as the guest, but instead of just having a guest talk about a game we chose, we're going to let them choose the game, so we can kind of insert some chaos again with having a 4th person that we don't necessarily know their taste or anything like that. So just to switch it up for you guys. But so that's what we have on the docket for now. So that should be it. Anything else? Oh, I wish I had a question. It's been so long, I forgot all about that. Does anybody have a question?
If you could change the style of this game, first of all, would you? And second of all, what style would you choose for this game?
That's hard. I don't.
Okay.
Did y'all like the style, first of all? The art style?
You mean like the art style,
Yeah.
or? Oh yeah, no, I think it definitely kind of fits in with like that style of those old games. I'm trying to think about that. The kind of the edutainment, I guess. Those games.
I dug it. I really like the style, and the problem. I like this question. I have an answer, but the problem is that I like the music in this game a bunch, and I don't think that the music would fit the new style that I chose. So I was thinking. So immediately I thought cel shaded, but I wanted to take a little bit further, and I wanted to specifically point out, I would say, Borderlands style, where there's a little bit more of a hard edge to some of the stuff. I think some of the creatures would look really cool with the Borderlands art style, and some of the death scenes, especially with the particle effects, like the gun being shot or like the blood being, whatever, the explosion. I think that stuff would look cool in a cel-shaded Borderlands-esque style, but I don't feel like the music, which I feel like is an integral part of this game, or I won't say integral, but like I really dig the music and I think it fits the way the game looks now. I don't think that would fit that art style. And I wouldn't want to change the music, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I would say, like, classic Tron style.
Classic Tron. Like the movie?
Yeah.
So like a lot of neon
Yeah,
on this
pretty
old-timey ship?
Yeah. I mean, not necessarily like multiple neon colors and, all flashing and stuff like that, but still kind of monochromatic, but more of like I guess it would be flipped, where it would be mostly dark and then like the lighter parts would be like the neon colors. Or actually, I guess it wouldn't necessarily be Tron. It'd be more of like the Hotline Miami style.
I'm looking it up now because I'm trying to...
Like where it has kind of like a sunset type...
It's what they call it,
colors.
vaporwave.
Yeah.
Vaporwave.
That's what I'm thinking of.
Okay, I get what you're saying. So a lot of what do they call it? Like fluorescent neon colors with like a lot of the lines, like the vector lines, and yeah, I think that would be cool. I think that would be really cool. Yeah, vaporwave is that could even just be a freaking with a color palette in this game. That would be tight. You think anything, Greg?
No, I mean, yeah, I don't know, man.
I'm trying to think if I could think of anything else, but I do think you were on the right track, Trevor. I think a minimalist aesthetic would. I mean, maybe it's because the game is already like that, but I think that really shines with this game. And I think it almost like maybe less is more. You don't need to be explosion of tons of color or anything, because you need to look at the details. The devil's in the details as far as like solving these deaths and disappearances and all that. So maybe being cel shaded or whatever, like I thought, would maybe be too much, be information overload. Okay. Where can people find you at, Trevor?
You can find me on the internet. I'll soon be back on Steam at Lyric Unsung.
Where can people find you at, Greg?
You can find me on Twitter at Boombox Hero. Facebook is the same, facebook.com/Boombox Hero. And on Twitch at twitch.tv/xdrdmagnegrox.
You can find me at Twitter at potato_salad, or you can find me on Saturday at Cahaba Bazaar serving Thai food. Hey. Yeah, I don't think that's it. I don't think we have anything else for Obra Dinn. It's pretty dope game. You guys should check it out if you think you like it. If you don't check it out. Don't be like Greg. Well, with that, this was actually a pretty short episode. So we came back and we knocked it out the park. So with that, we're missed checkpoints and we're out. Peace.